There were the cattle stalls and pens of Amygos, proud king of the Bebrycians, whom a nymph, Bithynian Melie, had borne to Poseidon Genitlios, with whom she had lain. He was the most outrageous of men, and even upon strangers he had imposed a shameless ordinance. No one might depart before trying his luck against a king in boxing, and many men from neighboring territories had thus met their ends. On this occasion, too, when he came down to the ship, he arrogantly scorned to inquire of their mission and their identity, but at once addressed them as follows. Listen, you sea wanderers, to things which is proper for you to know. It is the law that no stranger who has come to the land of the Bebrycians may depart until he has lifted up his hands in combat against mine. Therefore, choose the best man from among you all, and set him to box against me here and now. If you choose to ignore and trample upon my laws, you will find that the consequences will be grim and violent. So he spoke in his hotness. Wild anger seized the Argonauts when they heard, and the threats struck Polytheocus most of all. At once he stood at his comrade's champion and replied, Enough! Do not practice your wretched brutishness upon us, whoever you claim to be. We shall fall in with your laws, as you have stated them. I myself now willingly undertake to fight you. So he spoke, without hesitation. Amygos turned his eyes and stared at him, like a lion which has been wounded by a spear, and is surrounded by hunters on the mountain. It has no interest in them, though, pressed by a great throng, but its eyes stare only at that man alone, who struck first without killing. Then the son of Tyndareos took off his robe. It was finely woven of delicate work. One of the Lemnian women had given it to him to mark their friendship. For his part, Amygos threw down his dark double cloak, together with its brooches and the staff of rough mountain olive which he carried. In a moment, they had found a suitable place nearby, and with all their companions sat down in two groups on the sands. To look upon Amygos and Polytheocus were quite different in physique and stature. One was like the monstrous offspring of awful Typocus, or even one of the children whom Gaia herself once bore in her anger against Zeus. But the other, of the line of Tyndareos, was like that star in the heavens, whose sparkling rays are brightest as it rises through the darkness of evening. Such was the son of Zeus, his first beard still soft, his eyes shining, but his strength and might swelled like those of a wild beast. He moved his arms to test whether they were still supple as of old and had not been completely varied by toilsome rowing. Amycos, for his part, carried out no tests, but stood some distance away, silently staring at Polydaces. His heart throbbed in his desire to make the blood flow from his opponent's chest. In the space between them, Amycos' servant, Lycoreos, placed 2 sets of raw-leathered thongs, which had been tried to a terrible hardness. Then Amycos addressed his opponent with words of disdain. "I willingly grant you whichever you want, without the need for a lot, so that you will have no cause to blame me afterwards. Put them on your arms. When you have learned your lesson, you will be able to tell others of my surpassing skill at cutting the dried hide of bulls and smearing the cheeks of men with blood." So he spoke. The other made no abuse of it all, but smiling calmly, he at once picked up the thongs which lay by his feet. Castor and mighty Talaus, son of Bias, came up to him and quickly tied the thongs, offering many words of encouragement for the battle ahead. Aretos and Ornytos did the same for Amycos. Poor fools, they did not know that was the last time an evil fate would allow them to tie on the thongs. When they had each separately been equipped with thongs, they put up their heavy fists in front of their faces and came fiercely to meet each other. Then the king of the Bebrycians, like a jagged sea wave which rears up to confront a swift ship, and the ship barely manages to survive. Thanks to the skill of the clever steersman, as the sea surges to break over the deck, just so did Amycos ceaselessly harry the son off to Indareos and allowed him no respite, while Polydaces used his cleverness to escape unhurt from all the rushing attacks. Quickly, he sized up Amycos' crude method of fighting, both its strengths and weaknesses, and he stood his ground, swapping blow for blow. As when carpenters hit their mallets against ship timbers, which resist as the sharp pegs are driven into them, and countless ringing blows sound out over each other. Just so on both sides was heard the thud of cheeks and jaws, and a terrible shattering of teeth. They did not call a halt to the exchange of wounds, until both were overcome by breathlessness and exhaustion. Standing a little distance apart, they wiped the pouring sweat from their faces, painting with weariness. Then they rushed at each other again, like a pair of bulls angrily disputing for a grazing heifer. Amycos stretched himself upon his toes like a man going to slaughter an ox, and crashed his heavy fist down on his opponent. Polydaces, however, withstood the assault by tilting his head to one side, and a blow just struck his shoulder. He then stepped close to his opponent by swinging his leg forward, and with a sudden assault struck him above the ear, shattering the bones inside his head. Amycus fell forward on his knees in pain. The Minuan heroes gave a shout of triumph, and Amycus' life spirit dissolved in an instant. The Bebrycians did not neglect their king, but in a great mass they advanced upon Polydeces, brandishing hard clubs and hunting spears. His comrades drew their sharp swords from their scabbards and placed themselves in front of Polydeces. First, Castor struck Aner in the head as he rushed to attack. His head was split in two, and the halves dropped down onto his shoulders. Polydeces himself faced the monstrous Itumoneos and Mimas. The latter he charged and knocked into the dust with a swift kick under the chest. As the other approached, he hit him with his right fist above the left eye, tearing off the lid and leaving the eyeball exposed. Aeneas, Amycus' grim and violent attendant, wounded Talaus, son of Bias, in the side. He did not kill him, however, as the bronze spear pierced his belt and grazed only his skin without entering the vital parts. So too, Aretos wielded his solid club against Epitos, the steadfast son of Eurytos, who was not yet doomed to a wretched end. Indeed, Aretos himself was very soon to fall to the sword of Clytios, and Caius also, the bold son of Lycurgus, snatched up his mighty axe and leaped to the attack in the midst of the Bebrycians. In his left hand he held out his dark bearskin as protection. With him rushed the sons of Iacchos, and with them too raced the warrior Iason. As when on a winter's day the sudden attack of grey wolves causes panic among countless sheep in the stalls, the wolves have slipped, but the keen-scented dogs and the shepherds also, and as they search for the first victim, the gaze roams everywhere, while the sheep stumble over each other as they are hemmed in on every side. Just so did the Argonauts cause grim panic in the insolent Bebrycians. As when herdsmen or beekeepers smoke out a great swarm of bees from a rock, and for a while the bees buzz furiously in confusion in the hive. But finally, overcome by the murky smoke, they dash out of the rock. Just so the Bebrycians did not stand their ground for long, but scattered throughout their territory, bearing the news of Amycus' death. The poor fools did not know what other unexpected misfortune was close at hand. On that day, the fields and villages were ravaged by the hostile forces of Lycus and the Mariadynoi, who took advantage of the king's absence. For they were constantly in dispute with the Bebrycians about the iron-bearing lands. The heroes now raided the stalls and cattle pens, and rounded up a great flock of sheep and drove them off. This was how they talked among themselves. Imagine what these cowards would have done if by chance the gods had brought Heracles here with us. If he had been here, there would, I think, have been no boxing match. As soon as Amugos came to announce his loss, Heracles' club would have made him forget both his loss and his arrogance. Thoughtlessly did we leave him on land when we set off over the sea. Without him, each and every one of us will come to know grim destruction. So they spoke, but everything had come to pass through the plans of Zeus. As darkness came on, they remained where they were, tending the wounds of the injured. After sacrificing to the immortals, they prepared a great feast, and the pleasures of the mixing bowl and the burning victims did not allow anyone to sleep. On the shore the boat was tied to a laurel tree. They plucked its leaves to crown their fair brows, and in harmony sang a hymn to the accompaniment of Orpheus' lyra. All around, in the windless air, the coast rejoiced in their song. It was the Therapnaian, son of Zeus, whom they celebrated. When the rising of the sun from the horizon had lit up the dewy peaks and caused the shepherds to stir, the Argonauts untied the ropes from the base of the laurel tree, put on board as much booty as was needed, and set off under sail through the eddying Bosporus. Their monstrous wave rears up in front of a ship like a soaring mountain. It threatens to crash down as it towers high over the clouds. You would imagine that there was no escape from a miserable fate, as the violent wave hangs like a cloud over the middle of the ship. The wave drops, however, when confronted by an excellent steersman. So it was that the Argonauts proceeded by the skill of Tiphys, unharmed, though terrified. On the following day, they tied their ropes to the Thynian coast across from the Bebrycians. On the coast, there dwelt Peneus, son of Agenor, who of all men had endured the most grievous sufferings, because of the power of prophecy which the son of Leto had once bestowed upon him. He had not the slightest hold, even for Zeus himself, as he unringingly revealed to man the god's holy minds. Therefore, Zeus sent a long old age upon him, and took away the sweet light of his eyes. Nor did he allow Peneus to enjoy the innumerable good things which neighbors always brought to his house when they came to ask for oracles. But without warning, the Harpies would ever swoop down through the clouds and with their claws snatch the food from his mouth and hands. Sometimes they left behind nothing at all, sometimes just a little, so that he could stay alive in his wretchedness. Moreover, they poured a foul stench over his foods, so that no one could bear even to stand a long way off, let alone bring it to their mouths. So powerful was the rank smell of what was left of the meal. As soon as Peneus heard the crew's voices and the sound of their approach, he realized that the men who were passing were the very ones at whose arrival it was decreed by Zeus that he should enjoy the food set before him. Like a ghostly dream, he got up from his bed and, supporting himself on a staff, made his way to the door on the withered feet, feeling along the walls. His limbs shook with the feebleness of old age. His desiccated flesh was caked with filth. There was nothing behind his skin but bones. He came out of his dwelling and sank down on his very knees at the threshold of the court. A dark dizziness enveloped him. The earth beneath seemed to him to revolve, and he sank into a helpless torpor, unable to speak. When the Argonauts saw him, they gathered round in amazement, gasping and struggling for breath. He spoke to them in prophecy. "Hear me, most glorious of the Panhellenes, if indeed you are the ones who, at the chilling command of a king, are led by Jason on the ship Argo in search of the fleece. It is certainly you. In its prophetic wisdom, my mind still knows every detail. Even in the midst of grim troubles, O Lord, son of Leto, I bestow thanks upon you, by Zeus, protector of suppliants, who is most terrible to men who sin. In the name of Poibos, and for the sake of Hera herself, who of all gods is most protective of you in your journey, I beg you, help me, save an unfortunate man from outrage, and do not in scorn sail away and abandon me. The fury has trampled upon my eyes, and my old age drags out with no prospect of an end. But this is not all. On top of all my miseries, another misery, most bitter of all, hangs over me. The harpies swoop down from some invisible layer and snatch the food from my mouth. I can think of no device which would help, but when I desire to eat, I could more easily deceive my own mind than them. So quickly do they dart through the air. If ever they do leave me a scrap, the power of its stench is foul and unendurable. No mortal could bear to come near it, even for a moment. Not even his heart was forged with adamant, but bitter, insatiable necessity compels me to remain and thus feed my wretched stomach. It is decreed by the gods that the sons of Boreas will chase them away. It will not be as total strangers that they will act to protect me, as certainly as I am Peneus, once famous among men for many prosperity and powers of prophecy. My father was Agenor, and when I ruled over the Thracians, I won their sister, Cleopatra, with a bride price, and brought her to my home as my wife. The son of Agenor fell silent, and each of the heroes was seized by a deep grief. But particularly the two sons of Boreas, wiping away their tears, they drew close to him in his grief. Thetis grasped the old man's hand and addressed him as follows. "Poor man, no mortal, I think, has suffered more terribly than you. Why have you been afflicted with so many woes? It was wretched thoughtlessness which led you to sin against the gods through your knowledge of prophecy. It is for this that they are greatly angered. It's wise, however. If a god has certainly set this honor before us, then we are eager to help. Though our minds within us tremble, for the ways in which the immortals rebuke mankind are clear to all. Despite our strong desire, we shall not chase off the harpies when they come, until you swear that in so doing we will not incur the displeasure of the gods. So he spoke. The old man opened wide his useless eyes, and raising them towards Thetis, answered in the following words. Silence! Let not your mind imagine such things, my child. Be witness the son of Leto, who in his kindness taught me the art of prophecy. Be witness the grim fate to which I have been allotted, and this black cloud over my eyes, and the spirits below. May they show me no kindness after death if I break my oath, that no divine anger will arise from the helm you give. These oaths fired their desire to rid him of the harpies. Without delay, the younger heroes prepared a feast for the old man. It was to be the harpies' final prey. The Boreads stood nearby, so that they could drive them away with their swords when they swooped down. At the very moment the old man touched the meal, the harpies leaped down from the clouds without warning, like sudden storms or flashes of lightning, and attacked with a rush, screaming in their lust for food. The heroes cried out at the sight of them. The harpies devoured everything. With a cry flew off far away over the sea, leaving behind an intolerable stench. In pursuit of them raced the two sons of Boreas, their swords drawn. Zeus granted them unwavering strength. Without Zeus' help, they could not have followed after the harpies, who would always outrip the blast of the Zephyr on their journeys to and from Peneus. As when on mountainsides, dogs skilled in hunting race along as they track horned goats or deer, and straining just behind their prey, gnash together the teeth at the front of their jaws. But to no effect. Like this did Thetis and Calais sprint very close to the harpies, just touching them vainly with the tips of their fingers. Against the gods' wishes, they would have torn the harpies apart when they caught them far away at the floating islands, Plotai. Had not swift Iris seen and leaped down through the sky from heaven, she checked them and turned aside their anger thus. Sons of Boreas, it is not permitted by the gods to kill the harpies, the dogs of great Zeus, with your swords. I myself shall swear that they will never visit Peneus again. So saying, she swore by a libation of Styx water, which for all the gods is the most terrible and most sanctified, that the harpies would never again approach the dwelling of Peneus, son of Agenor. This too was decreed by fate. The Boreads were satisfied with the oath and turned around to hurry back to the ship. For this reason, men now call those islands the Turning Islands, Stropades, whereas previously they had been called the Floating Islands. The harpies and Iris parted. They entered a deep cave on Minoan Crete, and she sprang aloft on swift wings to return to Olympus. In the meantime, the heroes had washed all the filth of the old man's body, and had sacrificed sheep chosen from among the plunder from Amycos. Then they prepared a great feast in the hall, and sat down to dine. Peneus dined with them, greedily satisfying his desire, as we do in dreams. When they had had enough of eating and drinking, they stayed awake through the night, waiting for the sons of Boreas. The old man himself sat in their midst by the hearth, and told them about the paths they must sail and how to accomplish the journey. Listen to me now. It is not permitted by the gods that you should know everything accurately, but what they wish you to know, I shall not conceal from you. On a previous occasion, I thoughtlessly committed a foolish act by revealing the mind of Zeus in all its particulars due to the end. It is his wish that prophecy should reveal the decrees of the gods only incompletely, so that men are always ignorant of some part of the god's purpose. When you depart from me, you'll first see the dark rocks, 2 of them, where the sea narrows. I tell you that no one has ever succeeded in passing through them. They are not firmly fixed with deep roots, but clash together constantly. And above them, a great mass of seawater seethes and boils, while all around, the rocky shore sounds with a harsh roaring. Therefore, follow my advice, if indeed you are traveling with prudence and respect for the blessed gods. Do not thoughtlessly rush on the enthusiasm of the youth to bring death upon yourselves. I bid you first of all, let a dove fly far from the ship to test the way as a sign. If on her wings she passes safely through these rocks and reaches the Pontos, then hold back no longer from making the journey yourselves. Grasp the oars in the strong grip of your hands and cut through the narrow channel of the sea, since success will depend not so much on your prayers as on the strength of your arms. Abandon all other concerns and exert yourselves to the utmost and with confidence. Up until this point, I do not forbid you from calling upon the gods. If, however, the dove perishes between the rocks as she flies through, turn back, as it is much better to give way before the gods. You could not then escape from grim destruction by the rocks, even if the Argo were made of iron. Unhappy men, do not recklessly ignore my God-sent advice, even if you believe me to be thrice as accursed and hateful, or even more to the gods of heaven than I am. Do not recklessly ignore the bird sign and travel further in your ship. This, then, will turn out as it may. If you succeed in escaping from the clash of the rocks and reach the Pontos safe and sound, then proceed with the land of the Bithynians on your right, taking care to avoid reefs, until after passing the mouth of the swift-flowing Erebus and the black promontory, you reach the harbor of the island Thynias. Continuing from there a short distance over the sea, you will put in at the land of the Maria Dynoi on the opposite coast. There is a path which ascends to Hades, and the Acherusian headland rears aloft. Down below, the swirling Acheron cuts through the headland itself and disgorges its waters from a gaping cavern. Not far from here, you will pass by the many mountain peaks of the Paphlagones, Enetian Pelops, was their first king, and they boast of being his descendants. There is a headland opposite to the Bear Helike, sheer on all sides, and men call it Karambis. Above it the Gas of Boreas split apart, for on the seaside it reaches the sky. When one has rounded this, the great shore stretches out. At the end of the great shore, there is a headland, beside which the stream of the river Alus empties out with a terrible roar. Not far away, the stream of the Iris, a smaller river, rolls into the sea in wide eddies. Further on, from there the great Elbow rises up and juts out from the mainland. After that comes the mouth of the Thermodon, lying in a calm bay under the headland of Themyscira. The river has reached that point after its journey through a vast land. There's the plain of Doias, and nearby are 3 cities of the Amazons. After this come the most wholesome of men, the Kalubis, laborers who own a harsh and unyielding land, where they mine and work iron. Not far away, beyond the Genetaean headland of Zeus, protector of guests, live the Tibarenoi, who are rich in flocks. Their immediate neighbors are the Mosynoikoi, who dwell in the adjoining wooded plain and the hills. They build wooden houses on structures made of planks and solid towers called Mosynai. This is the source of their name. Bears by these people and put in at a rugged island, using a cunning ploy to drive off the awful birds which haunt that deserted place in their countless thousands. When on campaign, the Amazon queens, Otrere and Antiope, built a stone shrine to Hades on the island. Their help will come to you from the grim sea, help about which I must remain silent. So it is with kindly intention that I tell you to hold at the island. But why must I sin again by prophesying every detail in full sequence? Beyond the island and the mainland opposite live the Pilyres. Beyond them are the Macrones, and after that the vast tribes of the Becares. In order, after them come the Saperes, whose neighbors are the Pyceres, and beyond them finally are the warlike Colchians themselves. Continue in your ship until you reach the furthest rexes of the Pontos, where the swirling Phasis empties its broad stream into the sea through the Kytaian lands. As it rises from the Amarantian mountains, far away on the plain of Kirke. In entering the mouth of that river, you will see that the towers belonging to Kytaian Aeetes and the shadow groves of Hades. Their fleece hangs on the top of an oak tree and is guarded on all sides by a watchful dragon, a monster terrible to behold. Neither by day nor in the darkness are its awful eyes overcome by sweet sleep. Such was his speech, and fear at once gripped his audience. For a long time, they were downcast and unable to speak. Finally, seeing no way out of this terrible situation, Aeson's heroic son spoke. Aged sire, you have related a path we must sail, and a sign we must obey in order to pass through the hateful rocks and reach the Pontos. But I would gladly know from you also whether we will be able to return back again to Greece once we have escaped from these rocks. How can I accomplish this? How can I make such a long sea journey for a second time? I have no experience, and neither do my companions. In Colchia and Aya lies pressed against the very edge of Pontos and of the earth. So he spoke, and the old man addressed him in answer. Once you have safely passed through the deadly rocks, my child, have confidence, God will guide you on a different route, back from Aya, and there will be escorts enough on your way there. But, my friends, look to the Cyprian goddess for cunning help. Upon her rests the glorious success of your trials. Now ask me about these things no more. So spoke the son of Agenor. Just then the two sons of Thracia and Boreas darted down through the air and landed with their swift feet on the threshold. They were slid up from their seats when they saw that they had returned. Breathing heavily from his efforts, Thetis answered the eager inquiries by telling them how far they had driven the Harpies, how the goddess Eris had prevented them from killing them and had sworn an oath out of goodwill, and how in fear the Harpies had gone down into the great cave on the Dictaean crag. All the comrades in the house and Peneus himself rejoiced at the news, full of kindness towards the old man. The son of Aeson quickly addressed him. There was indeed then some god caring for you, Peneus, in your grim wretchedness, and he brought us here from afar, so that the sons of Boreas might help you. If he would also grant light to your eyes, then I think that I would rejoice as much as if I had succeeded in returning back to my home. So he spoke, but the other, his eyes lowered in despondency, replied, Son of Aeson, what has happened cannot be undone, nor will there be any remedy in the future, for my empty eyes are slowly wasting away. But rather I ask God to grant me death now, and in death I will find complete happiness. So the two of them spoke, one with another, until soon, while they were still conversing, the early born appeared. Peneus' neighbors gathered around him. Before this, they would visit him regularly, every day, and always bring him a portion of their food. To all of them, even the most humble, he gave his prophecies kindly, and his skill put an end to the troubles of many. Therefore, they used to come to look after him. Among them was Paraebios, who was dearest of all to Peneus, and he was glad to find the Argonauts in the house. In earlier times, Peneus had once told him that an expedition of heroes which had set out from Hellas to make for the city of Aeetes would tie its roads to the Thynian lands, and by Zeus' will would put an end to the assaults of the Harpies. The old man satisfied his visitors with his wise counsel, and then sent them away. But Paraebius alone he bade remain there with the heroes. Soon, however, he sent them off to bring back the very best sheep from his own flocks, and when he had left the hall, Peneus addressed the assembled company with gentle words. My friends, not everyone tramples on others and forgets kindnesses. Such a one is this man who came here to learn of his fate, for he labored and toiled to his very limits. But his poverty ever rapidly increased and ground him down. Day upon day his situation grew worse, and there was no respite to his labors. In fact, he was paying a wretched penalty for his father's mistake. Once upon a time, when his father was alone in the mountains cutting down trees, he paid no heed to the praise of a hamadryad nymph, who wept as she sorrowfully tried to persuade him not to cut the trunk of the coal oak in which she had always lived her long life. But in the insolence of youth he thoughtlessly felt it, and so the nymph sent a joyless fate upon him and his children for the future. When he came here, I realized the nature of the offense, and told him to build an altar to the Thynian nymph, and on it to perform sacrifices of expiation, asking her to release him from his father's tomb. After escaping the fate which the gods had decreed for him, he has never forgotten or neglected me. I have difficulty in getting him to go away, as he wants always to stay to help me in my distress. So spoke the son of Argonauts, and at that moment Paraebius reappeared, bringing 2 sheep from the flock. At the old man's bidding, Iason and the 2 sons of Boreas stood up to assist, and as the day drew to a close, they sacrificed the hearth, calling on Apollo, god of prophecy. The younger man among the crew prepared a splendid meal, and when they had dined well, they all retired to bed, some beside the cables of the ship, and some right there in Peneus' house. In the morning, the Ethesian winds had got up. They blow equally over every land, as a result of assistance which Zeus once sent. Among men of an earlier age, it is said, a girl called Kyrene grazed her flocks beside the marshes of Peneus. She wished to remain a virgin and to keep her bed undefiled. But once, when she had her flocks beside the river, Apollo snatched her up and, carrying her far from Haemonia, handed her over to the protection of the nymphs of the land, who lived beside the hill of Myrtles in Libya. And there she bore Poebus a son, Aristaios, whom the inhabitants of Haemonia, rich in grain, call Agreos and Nomios. In his affection for her, the god made her there a long-lived nymph and huntress. But he took her baby son to be brought up in the cave of Caedon. When the child had grown up, the divine muses sought out a wife for him and taught him the arts of healing and prophecy. They also made him keeper of their flocks, which grazed the adamantium plain of Ptia, around Shea Odrus, and the sacred stream of the river Apidanos. When Sirius was burning the islands of Minos with its fire from heaven, and for a long time the inhabitants had found no relief, then the Far Daughter advised them to summon Aristios to save them from the pestilence. At his father's bidding, Aristios left Ptia and settled in Chaos, having gathered together the Parrhasian people who are descended from the race of Lycaon. He built a large altar to Zeus, god of rain, and in due order performed sacrifices on the mountains to Sirius and to Zeus himself, son of Kronos. For this reason, the Athenian winds which Zeus sends cool the earth for 40 days. And on this day on Chaos, priests make offerings before the rising of the dog star. And this is the story which men tell. The heroes were thus constrained to remain where they were, and every day the people of Athenia showed gratitude to Peneus by sending him countless gifts. After this, they built an altar to the 12 blessed gods on the sea coast opposite, and sacrificed upon it. They then embarked on the swift ship to row further. They did not forget to take a timid dove with them. Eopemos caught it and held it cowering in fear in his hands. They untied the double cables from the land, and the departure did not go unnoticed by Athena. Without delay, she leaped onto a light cloud, which could bear her great weight swiftly, and hastened towards the Pontus, to bring welcome help to the rowers. As when a man who wanders far from his own land, as indeed we wretched men often do wander, and no land seems distant, but all paths are spread before us, can picture his own home, and as he sees in the flesh the path there over land and sea, his thoughts dart quickly, and his eyes grasp one place after another. Just so did the daughter of Zeus swiftly leap down and place her feet on the Thynian coast of the inhospitable sea. When they had reached the narrow opening of the winding strait, tightly formed by harsh rocks on both sides, the swirling rush of water surged around the ship as it proceeded, and they voyaged in great fear. For the roar of the rocks crashing together was already a constant din in their ears, and the sea-battered cliffs echoed with the noise. Then Eopemos took a position on the prow with the dove in his hands, and the others, taking the instructions from Tiphys, son of Hagnias, rowed at a quiet pace in order that they might afterwards have the strength to force the boat through the rocks. As they rounded the last bends, they suddenly caught sight of the rocks opening up, and all their spirits ebbed away. Eopemos sent off the dove to raise on its wings, and all of the Argonauts lifted their heads to watch. The bird flew between the rocks, which came together again with a great crash. A huge body of spray was thrown up like a cloud. The sea gave a terrible roar, and all around the limitless sky resounded. As the sea surged around the harsh rocks, a low sea case boomed within, and the white foam from the thundering wave was hurled high above the cliffs. And then the current around it took hold of the ship. The rocks caught the end feathers from the doll's tail, but it escaped safe, and the rowers gave a great shout. The Peace himself screamed at them to row with all their might, for the rocks were opening up again. They rowed in trembling fear until the back wave on its return washed them into the midst of the rocks. And then the most awful terror seized all of them, for unavoidable destruction hung over their heads. Beyond the rocks, they could now see all around the broad expanse of the Pontos. But suddenly, a huge, arching wave like a sheer mountain peak reared up in front of them. When they saw it, they lowered their heads and turned away, for it seemed certain to crash down and cover the whole ship. The Peace, however, eased off on the ship, which was struggling under the oars, and the brunt of the wave's force rolled under the keel. It then seized the stern and dragged the ship far from the rocks, carrying it aloft on its search. Eopemos went among all her companions, shouting at them to put all their force into the oars, and they gave a cry as they beat the water. Whatever progress the rowers made, the ship was thrown back twice as far by the surge. As the heroes labored, their oars bent like curved bows. Then, suddenly, a wave rushed upon them from the opposite direction, and like a runaway boulder, the ship was tossed on the wild wave even further through the hollow sea. The eddying current held her in the midst of the clashing rocks. On both sides, the rock shook and thundered, and the timbers of the ship could not move. Then Athena took hold of a mighty cliff with her left hand, and with her right she shoved the ship between the rocks. Like a feathered arrow, it shot through the air, and as the rocks clashed violently together, they broke off the tip of the stern ornament. Athena leaped up to Olympus after the safe escape of the crew. But the rocks were firmly locked together and rooted in one spot forever. For it was fated by the blessed gods that this would happen whenever any man had survived a voyage through them. After their release from chilling fear, the Argonauts no doubt breathed more easily as they gazed at the sky and the broad expanse of the sea spread out before them. For it seemed that they had been saved from Hades. The Peace was the very first to speak. "I believe that it is due to our ship that we have come safely through this danger at least. The responsibility is none other than Athena's, who breathed divine strength into the Argo at a time when Argos fitted her together with bolts. Thus, the gods do not permit her destruction. Son of Ioson, no longer have such fear of your king's order, now that a god has granted us safe passage through the rocks. Peneus, son of Argonauts, said that after this we would successfully accomplish our challenges." As he spoke, He drove the ship forward through the middle of the sea, following the Bithynian coasts. But Iason answered him with soft words. Deepus, why do you offer me these consolations in my grief? I have erred. My wretched folly offers no remedy. When Peleus gave his instruction, I should have immediately refused this expedition outright, even if it meant a cruel death, torn apart limb from limb. As it is, I am in constant terror, and my burdens are unendurable. I loathe sailing in our ship over the chill paths of the sea, and I loathe our stops on dry land, for all around are our enemies. Ever since you all first assembled for my sake, I have endured a ceaseless round of painful nights and days. For I must give a thought to every detail. You can speak lightly, as your worries are only for yourself. I have no anxiety at all for myself, but I must fear for this man and that. For you no less than for all other companions, but I shall be unable to bring you back unharmed to Greece. So he spoke, testing the heroes, and they all shouted words of encouragement. At their urging, his heart within was warmed, and he spoke to them without concealment. My friends, I am giving you confidence by your courage. Since you are so steadfast in the midst of grim terrors, I shall no longer be afraid, even if I must journey through the deep pits of Hades. Now that we have sailed through the clashing rocks, I think we shall never confront another such terror in the future, as long as we travel in accordance with Penelo's wise advice. So he spoke, and ceasing from such talk, they turned to the unremitting labor of rowing. Soon they passed by the swift stream of the river Rebus and the peak of Colone, and not long afterwards the black promontory, and after it the mouth of the Pules. There, in former times, Dipsakos received the son of Athamas in his house when he was fleeing on the ram on the city of Orokomenos. Dipsakos' mother was a nymph of the meadows, and he had no liking for wanton violence, but lived quietly with his mother and grazed his flocks on the banks of his father's waters. As the Argonauts went past, they saw his shrine and the broad banks of the river, the plain, and the deep flowing Kalpe. After the day ended, they labored no less mightily with unwavering oars, all through the windless night which followed, as when working cattle strain to cut a furrow and dam plowlands, and sweat pours in streams from their flanks and necks. Their eyes turned to look sideways under the yoke, parched breath snores ceaselessly from their mouths, and they force their hooves into the ground as they struggle all day long. Like this did the heroes drag their oars up through the sea. At the time when the immortal sunlight has not yet appeared, but it is no longer quite dark, and a faint gleam has pierced the night. The time which those waking call Amphilyke. At that hour they enter the harbor of the desert island of Thynias and stepped on the land, completely worn out by their efforts. The son of Leto, traveling afar from Lycia to the countless rays of the Hyperboreans, appeared to them, On both sides of his face, golden curls, like bunches of grapes, waved as he proceeded. In his left hand, he carried a silver bow, and his quiver was slung around his back on the shoulder. Under his feet, the whole island shook, and waves washed over the dry land. At the sight of him, the Argonauts were struck helpless with amazement. No one dared to look directly into the god's brilliant eyes. But they stood looking down at the ground, and he passed through the air far away out to the sea. After a long silence, Apelles finally addressed the heroes as follows. Come, let us call this the holy island of Apollo of the dawn, because he appeared to all of us here on his dawn journey. Let us build an altar to him on the shore and make what sacrifice we can. If later he grants us safe return to the Hyemonian land, then we shall offer to him the thighs of horned goats. For the moment, I bid you seek to please him with savor of sacrifice and libations. Be gracious, O Lord, be gracious in your appearance. So he spoke. Some of them at once built an altar out of stones, while others scoured the island to see whether they could find any deer or wild goats, such as frequently graze in the deep forests. The son of Leto granted them a successful hunt, and on the holy altar they solemnly burned 2 thighs from each animal by calling upon Apollo of the dawn. As the meat burns, they arrayed a broad dance in celebration of the brilliant Poibos, the Gepaion. With them, the noble son of Oiagros sung a clear song to the accompaniment of his Bistonian lyre. He sang how once at the foot of the rocky ridge of Parnassus, the god killed the monstrous Delpune with his bow, when a young boy still in his nakedness, still rejoicing in long curls. Be gracious, please. Eternally, Lord, your hair is uncut, eternally it remains unravaged. So does holy law proclaim, for only Leto herself, daughter of Koios, may hold it in her dear hands. And the Corycian nymphs, daughters of Pleistos, urged him on, shouting, Here, here! And this is the source of Poibos' lovely title. When the Argonauts had celebrated the god with dance and song, they poured solemn libations and, laying hands upon the victims, swore that they would forever help each other in concord of minds. Even to this day, there stands the shrine of kindly Homonoia, which at that time they built to honor the most glorious divinity. When the 3rd day came, they left the steep island, taking advantage of a strong west wind, and sailed further, observing as they passed the mouth of the river Zangarios on the coast opposite. The rich and fertile land of the Maria Dunoi, and the streams of the Lykos and Lake Antemoesis. The cables and all the ship's tackle shook as they proceeded in the breeze. The wind dropped during the night, and at dawn they were pleased to reach the harbour of the Acherusian headlands, whose beetling cliffs overlook the Bithynian Sea. Below, it stands rocks beach and smooth by the sea, and around them waves break with a great thundering. High above, spreading plane trees grow on the very peak. Down from the headland, a hollow glade inclines away toward the interior. Here, covered over by foliage and rocks, is a cave of Hades, from whose chill depths a freezing vapor forever rises to create a brilliant white frost, which grows warm in the midday sun. Around that dread headland, there is never silence, only the unending groan of the beating sea, and the sound of leaves rustling in the shrouds which rise from deep within the earth. Here, too, is the mouth of the river Acheron, which travels through the headlands to be disgorged into the eastern sea. A hollowed ravine is its path from the summit. In more recent times, the Nisaean Magians gave the river the name Zoonautis, at the time when they were about to settle in the land of the Mariandunoi. The river saved them and their ships when they were taken by a nasty storm. For when the wind dropped, they were able to bring their ship to land, thereby entering the river and the shelter of the Acherusian headlands. The ruler of that area, Lykos, and the Mariandunoi soon realized the Argonauts had moored in their territory, where their fame as the destroyers of Amykos had preceded them. Indeed, for this very reason, the Mariandunoi came from all directions to make alliance with them, and they hailed Polydectes as a god, since they had long been in a state of war with the overbearing Bebrycians. In one body, then they quickly proceeded to the city and spent the day in Lykos' palace, enjoying a feast in friendship and taking pleasure in each other's stories. The son of Aeson taught Lykos of the lineage and name of each of his companions, of Peleus' instructions, of how they had been entertained by the Lemnian women, of all they had done at Dolonian Kyzikos, and of how they reached Mysia and the Chios, where they unwittingly abandoned the hero Heracles. He reported Glaucus' prediction and how they had killed the Bebrycians and Amykos, and described Peneus' prophecies and his suffering, and how they had escaped from the dark rocks and encountered the son of Leto on the island. As Lykos heard Jason's story unfold in due order, his spirit was bewitched, but he felt grief at the abandonment of Heracles, and spoke to all of them as follows. My friends, what a man it is whose assistance you have lost on your vast journey to Aeetes. I saw him here in the palace of my father, Daskylos, and know him well. He came here on foot as he traveled through the Asian continent to recover the girdle of the warrior Hippolyte, at a time my cheeks were just showing their first beads. He took part then in the funeral games for my brother Priolas, who was killed by Mysians. Our people still grieve for him with the most pitiful lamentations. Heracles boxed against the mighty Tityos who surpassed all our young men in beauty and strength, and beat him, knocking his teeth on the ground. It brought under my father's sovereignty not only the Mysians, but the Mygdones, who dwell in the territory bordering on ours, and he conquered the land and peoples of Bithynia as far as the river Erebus and the peak of Colone. Moreover, the Paphlagonians, who are descended from Pelops and are surrounded by the dark water of the Belaios, likewise yielded to him. But since Heracles has lived far away, the Bebrycians and the outrages of Amycus have robbed me of this territory. For a long time now, they have plundered so much land that they have extended their boundaries to the marshes of the deep-flowing Hypios. Now, however, they have met vengeance at your hands. It was not, I believe, without divine blessing that I made war on the Bebrycians on the very day, son of Tyndareos, on which you slew the men. Therefore, I shall now happily offer whatever return I can, for this is what weak men should do when their betters provide assistance unasked. I shall send my son Daskylos to accompany all of you on voyage. For with him on board you will enjoy a hospitable welcome all along the coast as far as the very mouth of the Thermodon. Moreover, high up on the top of the Acherusian headlands, I shall build a shrine to the sons of Tyndareos. Every sailor on the sea will see it from afar and greet them reverently. For the future I will set aside for them, as for gods, a fertile area of good ploughland on the plain in front of the city. In this way, they entertained each other all day long as they feasted. In the morning they hastened to return to the ship. Lycos gave them countless gifts, and himself accompanied them on their way. He also dispatched his son from the palace to travel with them. Then it was that fated destiny overtook Itmon, son of Abas and excellent prophets. His skill in prophecy did not save him, since necessity led him on to death. In a marshal formed by the reeds of the river lay a white-tusked boar, cooling its flanks and a vast belly in the mud. It was a deadly beast, which aroused alarm even in the limbs of the swamp. No mortal knew that it was there, but it grazed alone in the broad wetlands. The son of Abas was walking along the bank of the muddy river when the boar leaped up from his hidden lair, and with a charge gored him in the thigh, cutting right through the sinews and the bone. With a piercing cry, Itmon fell wounded to the ground, and all the others shouted in response. Peleus aimed his javelin at the deadly boar, which had sped off in flight into the marsh. It rushed back at him, but Ida struck it, and with a terrible snarl, it impaled itself on the swift spear. They left it there on the ground where it had fallen, but Itmon, his life ebbing away, was carried by his grieving companions to the ship, and it was in his companion's arm that he died. They had no more thought for sailing, but remained there distraught and prepared their funeral. They lamented for 3 whole days, and on the 4th they buried him with lavish honor. The Myrindunoi and King Lycos himself joined in the rites. Beside his tomb, They slaughtered countless sheep as grave offerings in a manner appropriate for the dead. This man's tomb rises in that land a little below the Argonauts headlands, as a marker visible to men of later generations. It is crowned by a ship's roller made from wild olive and covered in abundant foliage. If, with the muse's help, I must also tell, without constraint, of what follows. Phoebus instructed the Boeotians and the Nisaeans to pay honors to this man under the title Protector of this city, and to establish a city around the roller of ancient olive woods. They, however, to this day, glorify Agamestor rather than Itmon, the descendant of God-fearing Aiolos. Who else died? Once more at that time, the heroes raised up a tomb over a lost companion, and 2 markers of those men may still be seen. The story is that Types, son of Agnias, died. He was not fated to sail further. He too was laid to rest by a brief illness far from his home, after the crew had buried the corpse of the son of Abbas. At this fatal disaster, they were overwhelmed by grief beyond bearing. They buried Typus without delay, but then they sank down where they were on the shore, in helpless despair, wrapped themselves in their cloaks, and lay still without thought for food or drink. Their hearts were depressed with sorrow, because all hope for a successful return seemed very far away. They would have delayed there in distress even longer, had not Hera put overmastering boldness into Anchios, as Typalaia had borne him to Poseidon beside the Imbrasian waters. And he was a steersman second to none. Rushing over to Peleus, he addressed him as follows: "Son of Iacchos, how can it be to our credit to ignore the challenge we have undertaken and to sit idle in a foreign land? It was less as a skilled warrior than Jason brought me far from Parthenia in pursuit of the fleece, than as one knowledgeable about ships. Therefore, have no fear at all about our ship. Moreover, there are other skilled men here. We may set any one of them upon the stern, and our sailing will suffer no harm. Convey this message of comfort to them quickly, and urge them with confidence to remember their challenge." So he spoke, and Peleus' heart was lifted with joy. Without delay, he stood in their midst and addressed them all. "My poor friends, who do we grieve to no purpose? Nothing will come of it. We may suppose these men to have perished as their allotted fate decreed, but we have many steersmen among our number. Therefore, let us not hold back from making the attempt. Cast grief aside and stir yourselves to your task." The son of Aeson answered him in helplessness: "Son of Iacchos, where are these steersmen of yours? Those who before we proudly claimed their skill, and are downcast and deep in despair than I myself. I predict disaster for us no less grim than what has befallen those who have died. If we neither reach the city of dead Aeetes, nor return again through the rocks to the land of Hellas, here a miserable fate will hide us from man's view, without glory, growing old and useless." So he spoke. With great eagerness, Anchios undertook to guide the swift ship. whose impulse came from a gods. After him, Erginos, Nauplius, and Eupemos sprang up, all keen to act as steersmen. But the other comrades held him back and entrusted the task to Anchios. And they embarked on the morning of the 12th day, for a strong west wind was blowing in their favor. They swiftly rowed out of the Acheron, and, confident in the wind, opened out the sail. As it billowed out before them, they cut their way through the water, blessed by fair weather. Quickly they passed the mouth of the river Kalikoros, where men say that, after leaving the peoples of India for residence in Davis, the Nisaean son of Zeus held his rites and established dances in front of the cave, in which he lodged through gloomy nights of ritual. From that time, those who live in the area have called the river Kalikoros and the cave Aulion. Next, they saw the tomb of Sthenelus, son of Actor, who died there on the seashore from an arrow wound. He was returning from the bold expedition against the Amazons, on which he had accompanied Heracles. The Argonauts proceeded no further, for Persephone herself sent up the tearful shade of the son of Actor, who had begged her to be allowed to see his compatriots even for a short while. Stepping upon the crest of the tomb, he gazed out at the ship. He looked as he did when he went to war, and his beautiful four-horned helmet with its scarlet plumes gleamed afar. Then he retreated back into the dark gloom, leaving the onlookers full of amazement. Mopsos, the son of Ampycos, interpreted the divine sign and told them to beach the ship and to appease the spirit with libations. They at once furled the sail and moored the ship to the beach, where they paid honor to Sthenelus' tomb with libations and ritual burnt sacrifice of sheep. As well as these libations, they built an altar to Apollo, the savior of ships, and burnt thigh bones upon it. There Orpheus dedicated his lyra, and for this reason the place bears the name Lyra. As the wind was strongly in their favor, they quickly went on board, let down the sail, and stretched it tight by both sheets. The ship sped powerfully out to sea, like a hawk which rides the breeze swiftly with the high air as it spreads wide its wings. Perfectly still, it glides on motionless pinions. They passed the stream of the Parthenios, most gentle of rivers, as it flows into the sea. There, as she climbs again from the hunt up to heaven, the daughter of Leto cools her body in the lovely waters. During the night, they rushed constantly forward and sailed by Sesamos and High Erytinoi, Crobialos, Coromna, and wooden Kytoros. After this, they rounded Carambis as the first rays of the sun appeared, and then they rowed along the great shore all day and all the following nights. Soon after this, they stepped onto Assyrian territory, But Zeus had settled Sinope, the daughter of Asopos, and had granted her perpetual virginity after he had been deceived by his own promises. He desired to make love to her and promised to give her whatever her heart desired. She then cunningly asked that he allow her to remain a virgin. In this same way, she also fooled Apollo, who wanted to sleep with her, and after them also the river Halys. No man ever took away her virginity in embraces full of desire. There too still lived the sons of noble Deimachos of Tricca, Deileon, Autolykos, and Plogios, who had become separated from Heracles. When they saw the expedition of heroic men, they came to them and told them truly who they were. They did not wish to remain on that coast any longer, but they embarked on the Argo as soon as the Argestes blew. With these men on board, the Argonauts were borne on by a stiff breeze and left behind the river Halys. Behind too fell the Iris, which flowed nearby, and the alluvial coast of Assyria. On the same day, they rounded at a distance the cap of the Amazons, which protects a harbour. There the hero Heracles once ambushed Melanippe, daughter of Hades, when she had come on an expedition, and as a ransom for her sister, Hippolyte gave him her highly colored girdle. Heracles then sent Melanippe back unharmed. They put in at the bay formed by this cave beside the mouth of the Thermodon, since the swell was rising as they proceeded. No river is like the Thermodon, nor does any other divide into so many branches to cover the land as it flows into the sea. If someone were to count them all, he would find 4 short of 100. There is, however, in truth, a single source which descends to the plain from the high mountains called, so we are told, Amazonian. From there it scatters through the higher terrain, which opposes it, and it is for this reason that its channels are winding. Each one twists its own way, either staying close to the main stream or making a long detour, wherever it can best find low ground. Many train away unseen and unnamed, but the Pteranodon itself mingles with a few other branches, and a full view empties into the inhospitable pontos below the curving headlands. If they had stayed there long, they would have mixed in battle with the Amazon women, and the strife would not have been bloodless, since the Amazons who lived on the Doyantian plain were far from kindly and did not respect laws. Grief bring violence, and the works of Hades were what they cared about. For they were descended from Hades and the nymph Harmonia, who slept with the gods in the recesses of the grove of Acmon, and bore him various daughters. Zeus, however, stirred the breezes of the Argestes again, and the wind carried them away from the rounded headland where the Themiscyrean Amazons armed themselves. The Amazons did not in fact all live together in one city, but were divided through the land in 3 tribes. There were these who lived apart and were at that time ruled by Hippolyte. The Lycastians also dwelt separately, as did the javelin-hurling Cadessians. But the next day and the following night, they coasted along the land of the Calubes. These people neither plough with oxen nor cultivate any honey-sweet fruits. Moreover, they pasture no flocks on dewy grazing lands. Rather, they dig in the hard, iron-bearing earth to exchange the metal for what they need to live. The rising of every dawn brings them wearisome toil, as they labor in a murky and smoky blackness. Immediately after the Calubes, they rounded the headland of Genethaianthois and hurried along the coast of the land of the Tibarenoi. There, whenever the women bear their husbands' children, it is the men who fall on to the beds and lie groaning, their heads bounce. The women look after them properly with food and prepare for them the baths due a newly delivered mother. Next, they pass by the sacred mountain and the land where the Mosunoikoi live in their Mosunai throughout the mountains. It is these huts which gives them their name. The customs and ordinances which rule their lives are quite at variance with what is normal. Everything that is proper to do openly, whether in public assembly or in the marketplace, all of this they carry out at home. Everything that we do in our houses, this they do outside, in the middle of the streets, and incur no censure for it. There's no public shame about love-making, but like grazing pigs they enjoy general promiscuity and mate with the women on the bare earth, paying not the slightest attention to anyone nearby. The king sits in the highest Mosune and administers fair justice over the large population. Poor chap. If he makes a mistake in his judgments, they look him up and keep him hungry for that day. They pass by the Mosunoikoi and spend the day rowing near the islands of Hades, which face them, as the soft breeze had dropped in the early half-light. Soon they saw darting through the air one of the birds of Hades, which inhabited the island. It shook its wings at the ship's path and shot a sharp feather at it. The feather lodged in the left shoulder of noble Oileus. His oar fell from his hand as he was struck. The crew stared in wonder at the feathered arrow, and Eribortes, who was sitting next to Oileus, pulled it out and bound up the wound with the belt by which his own scabbard was suspended around him. And then another bird appeared in flight. The hero Clytios, son of Eurytos, had stretched his curved bow in anticipation and shot a swift arrow at the bird to bring it down. It twisted around and fell near the swift ship. Ampidamas, son of Aleos, said to the crew, "Near us is the island of Hades, as you yourselves know, on the side of these birds. For my part, I do not think that arrows will be sufficient to allow us to land. Rather, let us devise some other stratagem that will help us if, mindful of Bineo's instructions, it is your intention to land on the island. Not even Heracles, when he journeyed to Arcadia, was strong enough to use his bow to drive off the birds which floated on the Stympalian lake. I saw this with my own eyes. Instead, he stood on a high peak and shook a bronze rattle in his hands to make a great din. The birds fled away, screeching and panic in fear. Therefore, let us too now give thought to some similar stratagem. I shall tell you what I myself have already devised. Put your high-crested helmets on your heads. Half of you by alternation should row, while the other half fit out the ship with carved spears and shields. Everyone together give out a mighty scream, so that the birds will take fright at the strange record, the nodding crests and the spears raised aloft. If we reach the island itself, then make a terrible din, both with your shields and by yelling aloud. So he spoke, and all were pleased with his stratagem to help them. On their heads they placed the bronze helmets, with their terrible gleam and their scarlet crests, which waved in the air. Every second man rode, while the others concealed the bow beneath their lances and shields. So a man covers his roof with tiles, both as an ornament for his house and to keep out the rain. And each tile fits exactly beside the next one. So did they cover over the ship by fitting the shields together. As is the noisy din of men moving in war when battle lines clash, so did a scream rise up into the air on the ship. The birds could no longer be seen, but as the Argonauts drew near to the island and beat on their shields, countless thousands immediately took off in every direction in panicked flights. As when from the clouds the son of Kronos sends down a fierce hailstorm onto a city and its houses. But the inhabitants sit calmly and listen to the clattering on the roofs overhead, since the winter season has not caught them unprepared, for they have already strengthened the roof. Just so did the birds send off a fierce hail of arrows against the crew as they flashed high up over the sea towards the mountains rising on the horizon. What was Peneus' intention in making the divine expedition of heroic men put in here? What help would then come to them in their need? The sons of Phrixus had embarked on a Colchian ship and were traveling from the court of Cytaean Aeetes at Aia to the city of Orochomenos in order to recover their father's boundless wealth. He had enjoyed his journey upon them as he was dying. On that day, they had been very close to the island when Zeus stirred up the blast of the north wind, and his rain signaled the watery passage of Arcturus. During the day, the wind was soft and gently shook the leaves on the topmost branches of the mountain trees. But at night, it fell fiercely upon the sea, and the roaring blast roused the waves. Dark mist filled the heavens. No bright stars appeared anywhere through the clouds, and all around a gloomy blackness pressed them. Soaked to the skin and fearful of a miserable end, the sons of Phrixus were carried aimlessly on the waves. The force of the wind tore out the sail and even broke the ship itself in two after it had been bettered by the swell. With the help of the gods, the four of them clung to one of those mighty planks which had been held together by sharp bolts, but which came loose as the ship broke up, narrowly avoiding death, and were carried in despair towards the island by the waves and the gusts of winds. Suddenly, an extraordinary storm broke, and the rain fell on the sea, and the island, and all the mainland opposite, where the insolent Mythological lived. In the dead of night, all four of the sons of Pixos, together with the strong clang, were thrown by the force of the waves onto the coast of the island. As the sun rose, Zeus' great rainstorm abated, and the two groups soon met one another. Argos was the very first to speak. "We beg you, whoever you are, by Zeus the Observer, to show kindness and give assistance to those in distress. Harsh storm winds swept onto the sea and scattered all the planks of the red ship, in which we had embarked to cross the sea on necessary business. Therefore, we now beseech you to give us merely a covering for our bodies and to tend our needs, taking pity on a men of your age who are in trouble. Show respect for suppliants and strangers, remembering Zeus the protector of strangers and suppliants. Both suppliants and strangers belong to Zeus, and on our behalf he is also no doubt the observer." Believing the prophecies of Peneus were being fulfilled, the son of Aeson questioned him prudently. "We will in kindness give you all of these things here now, but come, tell me truly where on the earth you live, what business compels you to travel over the sea, and your own glorious names and family." Helpless in his trouble, Argos replied that a descendant of Aiolos called Phrixus traveled to Io from Hellas. I have no doubt you yourself are already aware. Phrixus reached the city of Aeetes, mounted on a ram, which Hermes made golden, and even to this day you can see its fleece spread out on the thickly leafed branches of an oak. Then, on its own instructions, Phrixus sacrificed the ram to the son of Kronos, Zeus Pixios, chosen from all his titles, and Aeetes received him in a palace, and, as a gesture of his kindly intentions, gave him in marriage his daughter Chalciope, and asked no bride price for her. These two are our parents. Phrixus died an old man in Aeetes' house, and, in accordance with our father's instructions, we are traveling to Orchomenos to recover Athama's possessions. If, as is natural, you wish to learn our names, this man's name is Kytisoros, this is Brontis, and this is Melas. Myself you may call Argos." So he spoke, and the heroes were delighted at the meeting, and the Wonder Man showed them great kindness. Jason again spoke, appropriately to them in the following way. "You are indeed related to me through my father, and those you beg for help in your wretchedness are well disposed towards you. Criteos and Athamas were brothers, and I'm Criteos' grandson. I'm in fact traveling with these companions of mine from Hellas to the city of Aeetes. But you will talk of these things at a later time. Now first put on clothes. I think that it is the gods who have brought you to me in your distress." After these words, he gave them clothes in which to dress themselves, and then they all hastened to the temple of Ares to sacrifice sheep. Without delay, they took their places around the altar of small stones, which stood outside the roofless temple. Inside the temple was a sacred black stone, which all the Amazons once used to pray. Whenever they came over from the mainland, it was not their ritual custom to burn offerings of sheep or cattle on this altar, but they carved up horses which they had specially nourished for a year. After the sacrifice and the feast, which had been prepared, the son of Aeson then resumed the discussion as follows. In truth, Zeus watches over everything, and it is not concealed from him forever who among us respects the gods, and who is unjust. Just as he saved your father from death at the hands of his stepmother, and gave him very great prosperity in a distant land, just so has he brought you through, safe through a deadly storm. On this ship of ours, we may go in whichever direction we wish, whether to Aya or the rich city of divine Orchomenos. For it was Athena who designed it, and who, with a bronze axe, cut the wooden planks from the peak of Mount Pelion. In building it, she was joined by Argos. Your ship, however, was scattered by an evil wave before you could approach the rocks which crashed together all day long at the narrow channel of the Pontus. But come, we wish to bring the Golden Fleece to Hellas. Help us and guide our voyage, since my expedition is to atone for the attempted sacrifice of Pixos, which has brought Zeus' anger on the descendants of Aiolos. His words were designed to win them over, but they heard them with horror. For they did not believe that man who wished to take the ram's fleece would meet a kindly reception from Aeetes. Argos replied doubted the wisdom of undertaking such an expedition. My friends, you will not lack any help whatsoever that our strength can provide whenever they need arise. Nevertheless, Aeetes is savage and cruel, and so this expedition causes me very great fear. He boasts that he is the offspring of Helios, and around him live countless tribes of the Colchians. His terrifying voice and great strength would rival others. To take the fleece without Aeetes knowing is also no easy task, for all around it is guarded by a deathless and sleepless serpent, the product of Earth itself. The serpent arose on the spurs of the Caucasus, below the Typaionian rock, where men say that Typaon attacked the god with his mighty arms. He was struck by the bolt of Zeus, son of Kronos, and warm blood dripped from his lance. Even so he reached the mountains and the plains of Nysa, where to this day he lies and sees in the waters of Lake Sarbonis. So he spoke, and at once the paleness of fear came over their cheeks, as they heard of the terrible challenge. Peleus, however, answered him with confidence. Do not try to put terror into us with your words, my friend. We are not so short of courage that we will prove Aeetes inferiors, and we are tested on the arms. This crew too, I think, is knowledgeable in the art of war, for nearly all of us are descendants of the blessed gods. Therefore, I am confident that the Colchian tribes will not be of help to him, should he refuse to grant us the Golden Fleece and friendship. In this way, they spoke together until they fell asleep, having once again set aside themselves with a meal. When they awoke in the morning, a gentle breeze was blowing, and they raised the sail, which billowed out in the gusts of winds. Soon they left Ares Island behind, and on the following night they sailed past the island of Pylura, where Pylura slept with Kronos, the son of Uranos. When he ruled over the Titans on Olympus, and Zeus was still being reared by the Idaean Choretes in the Cretan cave, Kronos thus deceived Rhea, but the goddess came upon them in the midst of their lovemaking, and Kronos sprang up from the bed and rushed off, in the form of a long-maned horse. In shame, the Oceanid Pylura left that place and territory behind, and went to the sweeping Pelasgian mountains, where she bore the mighty Charon, part of whom resembles a horse and part a god, because Kronos was transformed as he left her bed. After that, the Argonauts travelled past the Macrones, the vast land of the Becares, the violence of Hades, and after them the Buceres. They got quickly through the sea, ever pressing onwards, propelled by a soft wind. The furthest recess of the Pontus came into view as they advanced, and the tall peaks of the Caucasian mountains rose up, where Prometheus' limbs are pressed down against the harsh rock by unbreakable bronze fetters, and the sliver feds an eel which always returns to him in its flight. In the evening they saw the eagle flying aloft near the clouds over the high point of the ship, and they heard the sharp beat of its wings. Despite its height, it caused the whole sail to shake as its wings carried it quickly past. Its appearance was not that of a bird of the air, but it plied its wings like well-planed oars. Soon they heard Prometheus' wretched groans as his liver was torn out. The air resounded to his cries, until they saw the flesh-devouring eagle darting back from the mountain along the same path. It was during the night that Argos guided them to the broad stream of the Passes and the very boundaries of the Pontus. At once they took down the sail and the yards and stowed them inside the hollow mast crutch. There too they rested the mast itself after letting it down. Without delay they rowed into the great stream of the river, which was churned up as it yielded before them. On their left was the towering Caucasus and the Kytian city of Aya. On the other side the plain of Ares and that god's sacred grove, where the watchful serpent guarded the fleece, which hung on the thickly leafed branches of an oak. The son of Aeson himself took a golden beaker and poured out drops of honey-sweet, unmixed wine into the river as a libation to earth. The gods who inhabited the land and the spirits of the dead heroes. He beseeched them to offer kindly help without threat and to receive propitiously the ship's mooring ropes. After this, Anchises spoke as follows. We have reached the land of Colchis and the stream of Passes. Now we must consider among ourselves whether we should make a gentle approach to Aeetes, or whether some other method will be successful. So he spoke. At Argos' urging, Iason ordered them to row into a thick marsh, which was close by, and to anchor the ship. There they spent the night, and not long afterwards they were pleased to see the coming of dawn.